The restaurant buzzed softly with the warmth of families and friends enjoying their meals, but for Daniel, it felt like a rare gift. He sat quietly at a corner table, his daughter leaning over a children's menu, filling the shapes with bright crayon colors. Her laughter, light and unburdened, was the music he treasured most. Life had not been easy. Since his wife left years ago, Daniel had been both father and mother, working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. Nights out like this one were precious, almost sacred. It wasn't about the food, but about showing his little girl that joy could still be found in small moments, even when life felt heavy. He watched her carefully pick out her favorite shade of blue, her tiny brow furrowed in focus. He smiled, though exhaustion lingered in the lines of his face. All the bills, the overtime, the loneliness, it all faded in these fleeting moments of togetherness. To anyone else, Daniel might have looked like just another diner in a crowded room, but to his daughter, he was her whole world, steady and unwavering. And to Daniel, she was his reason for fighting through every hard day. That night, as he sipped his coffee and listened to her chatter, he couldn't know how quickly peace would unravel, or that before dessert arrived, his hidden strength would be tested in ways that would forever change both of their lives. The calm of the evening shattered in an instant. The door to the restaurant banged open, and 3 men stormed inside with an intensity that silenced the room. Their eyes locked on a man in a sharp suit seated near the center, clearly someone important. Without warning, chairs scraped back, and harsh words escalated into violence. One of the men shoved the suited figure, another swung a fist, and a table crashed to the floor. Gasps filled the air as families pulled their children close. The staff froze, unsure whether to intervene or flee. Daniel instinctively reached across the table, pulling his daughter toward him. Her coloring book slipped to the floor, crayons scattering like frightened sparks. His heart pounded, not just with fear, but with the protective surge of a father who had only one thought: keep her safe. The chaos grew louder. Plates shattered, silverware clattered, and the well-dressed man struggled under the weight of 3 attackers. Diners looked on in paralyzed silence, waiting for someone, anyone, to act. Daniel crouched low, his arms shielding his daughter, her small hands clutching his shirt tightly. In her wide eyes, he saw both terror and a desperate trust. For a moment, he hesitated, torn between the instinct to hide and the voice deep within that told him he couldn't just watch. The world seemed to hold its breath. And then, something long buried inside him began to stir. A skill, a strength he had once walked away from but never truly lost. Daniel whispered into his daughter's ear, his voice steady despite the storm around them. "Stay under the table, baby. Don't move until I come back." She nodded, her little face pale but brave. Gently, he set her down, tucking her beneath the wooden booth like the most precious treasure he owned. Then he stood. The years of exhaustion seemed to peel away as his body remembered what his mind had long tried to forget. Before life became about bills and survival, Daniel had trained in martial arts, not just for fighting, but for discipline, control, and respect. Now, in this moment of danger, that hidden part of him returned like muscle memory awakening from a deep sleep. He moved quickly but without rage. With precise steps, he approached the brawl. One attacker lunged toward the suited man with a raised arm, but Daniel intercepted smoothly, twisting the man's wrist and guiding him to the ground with controlled force. Gasps erupted around the room. Another attacker charged, but Daniel sidestepped, using the man's own momentum to send him stumbling into a table. The third swung wildly, but Daniel ducked low, delivering a measured strike that disarmed him without cruelty. It was over almost as fast as it had begun. Daniel stood tall, breathing steady, not triumphant but calm, as though every movement had been guided by purpose rather than anger. The restaurant fell silent, the only sound the quiet sob of his daughter beneath the table, waiting for her father's return. The room remained still, every eye fixed on Daniel as he gently lifted his daughter from beneath the table. She clung to him tightly, her small arms wrapped around his neck, as if afraid to let go. The 3 attackers, subdued and groaning, were being restrained by others now emboldened to help. The suited man, the CEO everyone now recognized, straightened his tie with trembling hands and approached Daniel. "Thank you," he said, his voice shaking. "You saved my life." Daniel only shifted his daughter in his arms, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I just did what anyone should," he replied softly. "She was watching. I couldn't let her see her father stand by when someone needed help." The CEO blinked, surprised by the humility. Most men would have basked in praise, but Daniel's focus never wavered from his little girl. To him, the real victory was in showing her courage rooted not in anger, but in compassion. Around them, whispers spread, admiration, relief, awe. A waitress wiped her tears, a family clasped hands in silent gratitude. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt something beyond exhaustion. He felt seen. The CEO's eyes lingered on him, not just with gratitude, but with a dawning recognition that this quiet single dad carried something rare, a strength that went far beyond fists. A strength born of love, sacrifice, and the unshakable bond between a father and his child. The restaurant slowly returned to its rhythm, though the air still carried the weight of what had just happened. Police arrived, statements were given, and the shaken CEO made sure Daniel and his daughter were cared for. As the crowd dispersed, the businessmen lingered, watching the single father tie his daughter's shoelaces and gently coax her back into laughter with silly faces. Later that week, Daniel received a call he never expected. The CEO had tracked him down, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude. He had learned about Daniel's struggles, 2 jobs, late nights, the constant balancing act of fatherhood. "A man like you shouldn't have to fight just to survive," the CEO said. "You protected me. Let me protect your future." Daniel was offered a stable job in the company's security division, complete with benefits and the promise of steady hours that meant more time with his daughter. At first, he hesitated, pride tugging against relief, but the look in his little girl's eyes made the choice clear. On his first day, walking hand in hand with her to school before heading to work, his daughter squeezed his fingers and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Daddy." Those words filled him with more strength than any skill he had ever mastered. In the end, it wasn't a fight that changed everything. It was love, quiet, steady, and selfless, proving that sometimes the bravest acts aren't about defeating others, but about protecting the ones who matter most.